This Sunday I found out that there's a Discord server for debate, so I joined it. But before I could even get past the welcome channel, I was banned. I tried contacting the moderators to ask why, but it appeared that they had blocked me. Now, I used my real name for my Discord, and considering the fact that I didn't even have a chance to break any rules in the first place, I figured that this was most likely motivated against me personally. My debate partner Weston joined the server to get an explanation. When he asked why I was banned, they responded with, "Because he's a racist who did bad stuff," specifically quoting Ben Shapiro at the Arizona tournament that I was disqualified from. When he asked what's wrong with Ben Shapiro, they told him that Ben Shapiro is a racist. When he asked how, they banned him. This server is supposedly dedicated to debate, and yet they ban anyone who dares question the dominant narrative. My other friend Carter then joined to point this out to them, asking how they could call themselves debaters when they ban anyone who disagrees with them. They then banned him too. Now, I made a post about this in the debate subreddit, and it does a good job summing up some of the problems in the debate space concerning censorship and the illusions of tolerance, so I think I'll read it here. Not only does this further prove my point that the debate space is an echo chamber that silences opposing views, it directly contradicts their own stated rules. Be open-minded. Non-tolerance of different peoples, ideals, or styles of debate is not permitted. We encourage discussion, not shouting matches. Banning me before I even have a chance to speak doesn't sound like encouraging discussion or tolerance. But of course, I can hear the stock response from a mile away. We aren't tolerant of intolerant people. To that I say, how convenient that those doing the censorship always happen to be the tolerant ones. How convenient that those who you disagree with always happen to be the hateful ones. It's almost as if what's intolerant or hateful is entirely subject to whoever has power at the moment. The demand for tolerance has become a demand for forced conformity and censorship under the guise of social justice. Indeed, one of the greatest forms of social injustice and intolerance. Disagreeing with you is not intolerance. Having an opinion that you dislike is not intolerance. Having an opinion that offends you is not intolerance. Reading authors that you dislike is not intolerance. Arguing that we should not discriminate against people on the basis of race and gender is not intolerance. And even if any of that were intolerant by whatever baseless definition sociology professors conjure up, banning me because of it is intolerance. If you silence those that you subjectively deem to be intolerant, you're the intolerant one. If what I have to say isn't the truth, there should be no danger in me saying it. If what I have to say is the truth, the danger is in me not saying it. 3 months ago, I argued that we should be judged not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our arguments. I read a card stating that my race and gender have nothing to do with what's right and wrong, a card that might as well have been cited as Martin Luther King Jr., as it was virtually the same message. Yet political predispositions and misinformation surrounding the authors I used caused most to immediately close their mind and reject our arguments. The debate space has completely turned against me because of it, because of misinformation, because they want me to be the big bad racist that they think I am, because it's easier to ignore my arguments if they can write me off as a racist. I'm not a racist. Ben Shapiro is not a racist. Jordan Peterson is not a racist. They actively reject racism on both sides of the political spectrum, and countless slanderous articles or an 8-year-old tweet taken out of context doesn't change that. Both Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson have condemned the alt-right multiple times, and Peterson doesn't even identify as a right-wing thinker. These are baseless accusations coming from people who have done very little, if any, research into them on their own, and instead rely on groupthink and tribalism. I'm not surprised by this ban. I took a screenshot of that rule because I expected them to contradict it, and I won't be surprised if this post is removed like my last one too. It's still shameful and unacceptable, especially for a supposed debate space. I know most of you disagree with me. I know most of you hate me, but I urge you to remember and respect this ideal that makes debate possible in the first place. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. It was of course met with an overwhelmingly negative response, consisting of mostly personal attacks and misrepresentations of the Arizona incident and my views, as well as the usual misrepresentations of Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson's views, with someone even bringing up the enforced monogamy comment as a reason to reject Peterson. Now, last time I talked about the subreddit, they temporarily banned me for encouraging brigading. They told me that if I encourage brigading, even implicitly, I'll be banned. So let me say right now, explicitly, that I am not encouraging brigading. If anyone chooses to go to that subreddit after seeing this video, it's their choice. But the debate space is looking for any reason to ban me, so I'll probably get banned anyway after making this video. Now, some of you might be thinking, big deal, so what? You were banned from a Discord server, get over it. And sure, it might seem that insignificant at face value, but when you consider the psychological factors behind the ban, and the fact that these same factors and same behaviors are reflective of the debate community as a whole, and that this Discord server is just one of many examples of exclusion and censorship, you can see just how profoundly wrong this situation is. This ban reflects a much greater problem in the debate space specifically, and even in society in general. That's what this video is directed at. It's not about the ban. It's about the principles that such a ban contradicts, the principles that make debate possible and desirable in the first place, and yet are being disregarded by the debate community. Ironically, most of them went for the very argument that I preempted in my response. We aren't tolerant of intolerant people. and I said it in my post and I'll say it again, how convenient that they're the tolerant ones, that I'm the intolerant one. Has any fascist ever believed that they were in the wrong, that those they were silencing weren't dangerous? Of course you're the tolerant one. I mean, I hear this a lot. I'm for free speech, unless it's hateful, or unless it's offensive, or unless it's unreasonable, or unless it's whatever other subjective criteria I choose. Aside from this being a blatant contradiction, because if you put restrictions on free speech, it's no longer free speech, it's restricted speech, I think there's two big technical problems with this. The first is who gets to decide the criteria. When should we restrict speech? When it's offensive? What if it's unintentionally offensive? Or better yet, what if it's offensive but true? Should we restrict speech when it's unreasonable, or when it's dangerous, or when it's uncomfortable? There are theoretically an infinite amount of criteria to choose from, and criteria are only desirable insofar as the values they result in. And of course, people have different values. The second problem is who gets to interpret the criteria once chosen. Okay, fine, we'll ban hateful, offensive, and unreasonable speech. What counts as hateful? What counts as offensive? What counts as unreasonable? I'm sure white supremacists think that people who aren't racist are very unreasonable, and they'd probably get really offended if you suggested otherwise. Furthermore, I personally think that this attempt to censor anything hateful is in itself very hateful. There's no internal consistency preventing contradiction, especially when those doing the censoring contradict their own criteria all the time. They'll say, okay, no racism, and then they'll discriminate against someone for being white. Then they, of course, justify this by redefining racism to include power for whatever reason, but that still relies on the initial assumption that all white people have power and all non-whites don't have power, which is not only racist, but it's inaccurate. But back to the point. It's impossible not to violate these criteria. There will always be someone who finds what you say offensive. There will always be someone who finds what you say unreasonable. That's a necessary risk of speaking your truth. In order to think, you have to risk being offensive. Jordan Peterson talks about this. He puts it this way: freedom of speech is how we solve complicated problems. Because the problems are complicated, your solution might be stupid at first. Because the problems are complicated, other people might disagree with and be offended by your solution. If freedom of speech isn't the right to say stupid and offensive things, it doesn't exist. These criteria and the way we interpret them are subjective, meaning we default to whoever has power at the moment. This is actually one of the reasons why freedom of speech has been so important historically. Anytime freedom of speech has been violated, tyranny has followed, both by the nature of the violation itself and the subsequent effects. The moment you accept a method of evaluating and restricting language that relies on subjective interpretations from power structures, you immediately put yourself and everyone you care about at risk for when the power shifts. Remembering the poem First They Came would be of use here. To put a spin on it, first they came for the racists, and I said nothing because I was not a racist. Then they came for the hateful, and I said nothing because I was not hateful. Then they came for the intolerant, and I said nothing because I was not intolerant. Then they came for me, accusing me of being an intolerant, hateful racist, and there's no one left to speak for me. Everyone must be able to follow their own rational mind regardless of the political atmosphere. Man's mind is all he has. You can't think for another man. You can't objectively prove that your thoughts are better than his. Sure, you can prove it with your predefined frameworks, and you can prove the validity of those with even more frameworks and value presuppositions, but those are continuously subjective. There are universal, undeniably intrinsic truths at the most basic metaphysical level that we can build off of, but how we build off of them is up for debate. No matter how confident we are, we must realize that we don't know anything. This doesn't mean you give up on the search for truth like the post-modernists and moral relativists have. It doesn't mean that truth doesn't exist. It just means we have to find it, each and every one of us. You might think you found the truth, and maybe you have, but that doesn't mean that someone else has. And you don't help them find it by forcing or censoring them. You help them find it by debating them and testing their position and posing questions. And you often get closer to the truth yourself as a result. There's a double bind in here. If you have the truth, force and tyranny isn't necessary. If you don't have the truth, force and tyranny isn't justified. By the same token, as I said in my post, if what I have isn't the truth, there should be no danger in me saying it. If what I have is the truth, the danger is in me not saying it. Everyone's so quick to sacrifice other people's rights in the pursuit of their subjective morality. Ironically, the moral relativists are guilty of this the most. If your morality is really true, you shouldn't need to achieve it at the involuntary expense of others. If you made believing in your morality the only requirement for acting against other people in its pursuit, you justify every crime and every act of tyranny. Every person who's injured or stolen from someone else has believed they were justified in doing so because of their subjective greater good. You can't prove that your greater good is inherently better than anyone else's, and so achieving it at the expense of others is unjustified in every case. The alternative is justifying it in every case, whether it be Nazi Germany or United States progressivism. It's for this reason that we must not infringe on each other's rights. We must not silence or sacrifice others. We must let each and every man find the truth for himself and help him as much as we can, and let him help us too when possible. To do that, we need freedom of speech. In fact, in order to even argue against freedom of speech, you need freedom of speech, meaning you can't argue against freedom of speech. It's intrinsically valuable. There are so many reasons that restricting freedom of speech is a terrible idea. An infinite amount of reasons, because there are an infinite amount of abstractions that I can generate because of freedom of speech. The logos is real, and it's intrinsic, and freedom of speech is a necessary criterion to it. Be extremely cautious when you hear the call for tolerance and inclusion. These people aren't tolerant. They're just as intolerant and unaccepting as the strawmans they project onto their opponents. They're not inclusive. Their ideologies are rooted in division and exclusion. Only they found that the best way to exclude others is to condemn exclusion itself, and then reap the simultaneous benefits of silencing opposition and signaling their virtue. The intolerant discovered that tolerance is actually the most effective and insidious form of intolerance. The term political correctness makes this clear as day. They reject notions of normal or correct under moral relativism, indirectly but intentionally casting their own normative doctrines and notions of correct. They condemn claims of moral superiority in an attempt to gain the moral high ground. The pathology of tolerance has allowed the radical left to have absolute control over academia, free from opposition. They indoctrinate students into cultural Marxism and victim mentality, and then ban non-leftists from speaking on college campuses to ensure that their beliefs aren't questioned and sustain the echo chamber. They justify this under the concept of safe spaces, while they allow students to actually threaten and harass professors like Brett Weinstein and Jordan Peterson, or even other students who disagree with them.
I'm interested only in dialectic, which does mean I listen to you and you listen to me. Would you like to hear the answer or not?
No!
Okay.
Listen! Stop telling people of color they're fucking useless. You're useless. Get the fuck out of here!
Safe spaces aren't safe at all. They allow pathological ideologies to brew, giving its ideologues who follow its swords while tying the hands of all those who contest behind their back, saying fight, and then justify it by accusing those that they actually oppress of having privilege. According to them, they're just balancing the scales, and that's okay because reverse racism doesn't exist. Why? Because they said so. The debate space is no different. Students are being reared into identity politics and political correctness. They learn everything about debate, yet nothing about debate. Debaters that go against the narrative and assume truths are disqualified and ostracized. If anywhere, debate is where all arguments and positions should be tolerated. The current debate space isn't really concerned with debate. It's not concerned with entertaining ideas and trying to find the truth. It's not concerned with humility and progression. It's concerned with reinforcing their political presuppositions and biases. It's concerned with virtue signaling and groupthink. In fact, most debates boil down to who can out-leftist their opponent, who's less racist or less ableist. If you look up college policy rounds on YouTube, a vast majority of them focus on who can destroy whiteness or capitalism faster. Your argumentative options consist only of the radical left or the moderate left. These people don't want actual debate. They want to pretend like they're debaters. They want to pretend like they're thinkers. They want to pretend like they're woke. When real debates happen, they're only capable of demonizing their opponents and crying oppression. They've decided from the beginning that they're right, you're wrong, and you're not going to change their mind. If you try, you lose. You get disqualified. You get banned. You're hated. They can hate me all they want. They can disqualify me from as many tournaments and ban me from as many platforms. I won't be silenced. This is far more important than anything that they could ever do to me. We have to save debate. I have a lot of projects that I'm working on towards this goal, and I'll announce them soon, but I've had a Discord server running for a couple weeks now for debaters to create and share and review arguments like the one I made in Arizona, and just be able to express ideas that would otherwise be censored by the debate community. I've named it the Debate Dark Web for obvious reasons, and if any of you are active in the debate community, whether you're a debater, a coach, or a judge, and are interested in being a part of it, I'll put my Discord info in the description. You can privately message me and I'll add you to it. And for anyone else who's been supporting me, I just want to say thank you. I really can't express how grateful I am. I have a lot more videos I plan to make, so look out for those, and let me know what you thought of this one in the comments. I try to read all of them. Thanks.